Um, so very welcome to today's virtual opening. My name is Nadia Bartels. For those who have not met me before, I'm the director of Tchoban Foundation. And while due to the pandemic, as you all know, it's quite difficult to organize big openings at the moment, but still it is an option that we can meet in this way and talk on Zoom and discuss the exhibition. So, well, first of all, I would like to introduce the program of today's conference. So there will be introductory speeches by the people who will influence this exhibition, by the scholars. So I will try to introduce everybody. Vladimir Sidov, the curator of the exhibition, who could not come to Berlin, will be speaking from Moscow, and then our curator and trustee Eva Maria Bartkov, a renowned scholar, would follow. And afterwards, I'll give the panel to the founder of the museum and initiator of this exhibition, Sergei Tchoban. And then other scholars will be speaking. Alessandro De Magistris, a renowned architect and professor at Politecnico Milano, whose research is mainly on Russian and Soviet architecture of 30s and 50s, and he's teaching urban history or urban development history. And then, well, I hope I pronounced it correctly, Deyan Sudjic, a renowned writer and former director of the Design Museum in London, will be speaking. His new book on Boris Iofan will appear soon with new acknowledgements about the architect. And then well-known journalist Bernhard Schultz will be speaking. And then there will be a discussion moderated by Sergei Tchoban. And after this discussion, you'll have the possibility to ask questions. And just don't forget to raise your hand. Well, first of all, I would like, before I forget it, I would like to thank some very important people who made this exhibition possible. First of all, our sponsors. I noticed Andrei Stolny from Guardian has joined us, and without their support, this exhibition wouldn't be possible. Also, the company Mastech supported us a lot, Studio Veneto and Speech. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank my colleague, Maxim Schultz, who really did his utmost to make this exhibition possible, and who, did a lot on design and labels and everything that belongs to it. And our graphic designer, Annika Page, who created a beautiful design of the book that will be available at our bookstore. Well, so now I would like to share my screen with the curator to show you the film by the curator of the show, who will introduce you the exhibition and the work by Boris Iofan. Perhaps he can do it much better than me, because well, he made the key research on these mainly unknown works recently discovered. So
Sorry, there is no sound.
Yeah. But we can read it. Read the.
Но у меня звук есть. Я не знаю, почему там с чем это связано. У меня звук есть, но нормально. Ага. So I'm very sorry. I just noticed that some of you, or perhaps all of you, I don't know, could not hear the speech. I don't know what was the reason, because here it all worked perfectly, but I hope you all could read the subtitles at least. So perhaps perhaps it was a small solution. I'm very sorry for that. I do not understand why it just why it didn't work. You know, the miracles of techniques sometimes. And now I would like to give the panel to our trustee and our curator, Eva Maria Bachhofen, who is a famous and well-known researcher on architectural graphics. And she was the head of the architectural archive of the Academy of Arts in Berlin for many years, and is now researching on the works by different architects and writing different books and scientific publications. So I would like to give the floor to Eva Maria. Very welcome.
Thank you very much, Nadia. I hope you can hear me all. Is it so? Okay, thank you. So dear Nadia, dear Sergei, dear friends of architecture, as a member of the board of the Tchoban Foundation, I'm very glad to be with you online today. It's the first time for me to be with the Tchoban Foundation online. And it makes me very happy to know this exhibition at the Museum for Architectural Drawing. It is the only museum, as you all know, in Germany that is exclusively dedicated to artistic architectural drawings. It is thanks to the architect and passionate draftsman Sergei that this museum exists. The example of Boris Iofan's drawings makes it clear that architectural drawings have neither national borders nor have to follow a strict development in an artist's life's work. Thus, the drawings reflect not only the architect's imagination under different political systems, but also his tremendous artistry. And because the thoughts of each design are conveyed solely in the quality of the architectural drawing. I hope that we will be able to visit the exhibition live at the Museum of Architectural Drawing as soon as possible, and sincerely wish it the success it deserves. So that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Eva. And thank you very much for joining us today. And well, we hope that we will have the possibility to make an event or a finissage of this exhibition where we can all come together and talk about Boris Iofan. Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to the key person of this show, Sergei Tchoban, who is actually the founder of the museum and initiator of the show, and who discovered this this jewel, the fold of the drawings, and made this exhibition possible. So Sergei, very welcome if you kindly say some words.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia. Thank you, Eva Maria, for very kind words. Of course, thank you to Vladimir Sidov. I hope he get also our warmest messages. And of course, thank you very, very much for all honorable guests like Deyan, Alessandro, and of course, our sponsors, Andrei Stolny. I am so thankful to your, you know it. In fact, the person of Boris Iofan was very interested for me since years, and really many years. And what we can see today is the result of my collection activities since nearly 20 years. In fact, in the last time, we got also part from the granddaughter of Boris, Ekaterina, who is here, and I'm very glad to greet her also in our circle. But many other works are also from the former times, were collected by me and given to Tchoban Foundation for this exhibition and for showing in another exhibitions. We had already very many participations in many exhibitions all over the world, in Canada, in the Switzerland, here in Berlin, in the Historical Museum, where the works by Boris Iofan were shown. Because, of course, Iofan is like a symbol for very significant time in the history of Soviet Union, of Russia. And that's why, how I understand this exhibition, I understand it as not a curator, but somebody who is on the initial of this exhibition, and I'm very glad that it comes now to the show. I would see this exhibition, first of all, as a history, as a story of somebody who was very passionate for architecture, was born in a very exact time between First and Second World War, was active, and after Second World War in the country, but also in the part of Europe, what got very clear political relationships. And as a talented architect, tried to serve, tried to be in the trend of time, because what he wanted very much, maybe most of all other wishes he had, he wanted to build, he wanted to realize his works. His biggest work he won in the great big competition with somehow strange result, but very, very important, one of most important competitions of 20th century, competition of Palace of Soviet. And that's why for me it is a history about somebody who was an architect in the special time, and we have every time somehow a special time. So far it is for me about mirroring of history in the architecture, because I believe the architecture is not like a free from the policy, free from the relationships to the governments and clients, not such a free art, but it is art what is very related to the surrounding, to the political surrounding, to the system in which this architecture will be built or not will be built. And after this aspect, we try to organize all exhibition. And I just show you some images because unfortunately we make it digital and we cannot be in the circle of exhibition in the presence. So I show you some pictures how the exhibition will be made. So Nadia, maybe you can make it for me as a small show, and I would give some comments about. So you give us, give me the Rechte, you give us the rights and we can do it. So the exhibition, as all of us, I hope you can see it all, goes over 2 floors, as every exhibition of us. And the first floor, beginning with explanation, and after that, the time where Iofan has studied and his young works in the Italian Academy of Art of Rome, and then in Italy till 1923. We describe on the background color of Pompeii, like Pompeii, red color, like relationship to the Italy. We explain about the work of Iofan in Italy, his learning, his research of classical monuments, because of course, a Russian architect or any European architect, his dream was to go to Italy and to learn that from the originals. And that's what we show. And then step by step, we see how the language of Iofan, his stepped constructions going with the cupola, with the hemispheres, going from the classical buildings from Pantheon and all of them, but in the direction of reduced classic with the less details, but with very monumental compositions. It goes till this work of his for-diplom work, where you can recognize already the first ideas for the later Palace of Soviets. And then you go to the end of his Italian time with his cemetery projects he made 1922. Then he was invited from Prime Minister Rykov to Soviet Union, and it began constructivist time, functionalist time, with very reduced, let's say very clean architecture he made in this time, parallel to rationalistic architecture in Italy. And in this time, he made his first famous works, like House of Embankment, on Embankment, or Cemetery on Barvicha. And then the red lines comes. This red line is symbol for the whole period he made Palace of Soviet for Stalin, for Stalin's government, for all competitions were coming in this time. And this line follow us to the second floor, where we get this part, this very important part of the exhibition. And then we go on the right side, jump to his work. After the Stalin time, he was coming back to functionalist, rationalist works after Khrushchev's letter about reducing of ornaments, reducing of rich designed architecture, what is not possible for workers of Soviet Union. So far in the second half of 50s, in 60s and 70s, he was died 76. He made this very reduced architecture in the tradition of time. The whole life of him is like a life in the frame of political situation, in the frame of system, fortunately or unfortunately, the work of many architects in many different times. And if you go closer, we see that the architecture in this time was very rational, very close to rationalism in Italy. We know from Piacentini, we know it maybe less from Piacentini, but from Tirani, from Catania. So the architecture where clean lines are going in direct relationship to classical tradition, but very reduced. And then it goes even closer to this typical apartment areas we know from all over the world, but know also from Russia. And Iofan worked on it in the second half of 20th century. But if we come then in the second floor, we see the main core of the work of Iofan, and that is really what we speak about Palace of Soviets. 1931, he took part for the first time in the competition of Palace of Soviets. It was open competition. with many architects. They are coming from all over the world. Armando Brasini, his teacher from the Academy of Art in Rome, was there. Gropius was there. Hannes Meyer, Le Corbusier made very significant work. Pölzig. So many architects, they are coming in very naive, like all architects are. They like to build for anybody, as they are coming and like to make their work and like to declare its work is very great. And so Iofan won this competition. Somehow he was close to government. He was already chosen somehow from the soul of this competition. He was chosen to build this work, and made the first prize in the open competition, one of three, with one American architect, Hamilton, and with one Russian architect, Zholtovsky, and then made invited competitions, one of them also, and coming with two partners of him. That is his first competition, very close to his diploma work. We have seen in the first hall. And after that, he was coming with his co-authors, co-authors Choucault and Gilfreich, were moved to him from the government because the government had a feeling he is not experienced enough to make this most important monument of all times in Soviet Union. That's why he got two partners, made with him this project. And then the idea to make this big monument with a Lenin sculpture. Lenin's sculpture should be 100 meters long, and the whole monument should be 415 meters. So only the head had to be like a 4-story building, 14 meters big, made by Sergei Merkurov, a very famous sculptor of that time. And so step by step, it became to be smaller and smaller, as many monuments of such regimes, and at least it was not built. Iofan was very close, very connected with his soul, with this monument, has worked on this monument 20 years, and after that also with many sketches. So it is somehow the tragedy how somebody who was very connected to all trends of that time, somehow coming with nothing out from this very long development of one big object. Of course, we cannot see this object without to relate it to the government of that time, to the system of that time, to the all political surrounding. That's why I think the most important message of this exhibition to say the architecture is like a mirror, like a really very true, very trustful mirror of the time and political surrounding, what goes parallel to the architecture. Parallel to this work, he made many other. Moscow University was a work made him out from big commissions, because he tried to make a discussion with Stalin, with the government, to put this building, university, on the border of the Lenin Mountains, where the ground was very bad to ground at the building. So far, the project was moved from him to another architect, to Rudnev, and he lost all his commissions and made more or less the life of a very important architect through all 60s and 70s, but not more with the same relationship to biggest developments of that time. But he worked already, as I told, in 60s and 70s on big institute projects, apartment area projects, but the most important building where all his mind was through many years was not realized. It is like a very special line of life, and I would like to discuss about it later. But now, with pleasure, I would give the word to Alessandro De Magistris, with whom we made already many ideas to make an exhibition for Boris Iofan. For example, in Casa Mantegna in Mantova, with a wonderful round courtyard, we try to make a interesting solution for installation in this courtyard, an exhibition by Iofan, together with the rector of Milan University in Mantova, Federico Bucchi. So, however, I give the word to Alessandro De Magistris and then to Deyan Sudjic, who is also very, very big knower with a lot of knowledge about Boris Iofan, and then to Bernard Schultz, who makes a lot of work together with our museum. So please, Alessandro.
Thank you so much, Sergei and Nadezhda. It's a great pleasure to see you after many time, and I'm really have a gratitude for inviting me to this event, which is I can express my idea really great and very important. This exhibition, and I would like to stress that is the first exhibition devoted to these great architects in the West, after the previous exhibition organized in Moscow in many years ago at the Marquis, at the Museum of Architecture, is a really important exhibition, and undoubtedly represent a further step, decisive step, in my opinion, in the rediscovery of one of the most important controversial protagonists of the 20th century architecture. One of the greatest architects, of course, in Soviet Union, but not only, which is linked with many paradoxes. I mean, on the historiographical point of view. Think, for example, to the prolonged lack of studies that supplemented the book published by Hegel just after the Iofan's death at the end of the 70s. And we have to wait really the latest year to see a new wave of interest, very important wave of interest and research. Equally significant, I can say, as an Italian researcher scholar, significant and paradoxical in my point of view, is the lack of knowledge that has enveloped up to recent year the crucial period, the knowledge of the crucial period spent by Iofan in Italy, 10 years from the 1914 to the 24. A gap accompanied by a prolonged absence of in-depth and detailed reflection of the real and rich influence of Italy on the designer's profile. The exceptional nature of this relationship with Italy, the second homeland of artists of all nationalities, as he wrote on Accademia Architetturi, was openly declared. And in this exhibition, we have this importance is clearly mirrored, reflected. Still paradoxical is, in my opinion, is the same on the point of view of historiography, of course, is the almost exclusive attention for many times paid only to the final project of the Palace of Soviet. Of course, a masterpiece, a very important work, a work of centrality in the history, in the biography of Iofan and the history of Soviet Union, but a work that, a moment of his creative profile, which has forced and flattened his critical position in the panorama of the 20th century architectural literature, to the detriment of a rich and multifaceted production in which many works are important and reflect a very articulated creative vision. Paraphrasing what has written a colleague of mine recently, in the 30s, in the richest moment of his professional and creative life, Iofan was simultaneously at the same time busy with the Palace of Soviet, different moment of his elaboration, the entry of Commissariat of Heavy Industry, Narkomtechprom, and other, the pavilions in Paris and New York, and many other important work, all crucial project of the regime. And I quote, under the Stalin's gaze, he worked and expressed himself in an extremely original way, influencing the creative development of the design culture in the USSR, and express itself in at least 3 different architectural languages: modernist, Barvika, for example, but also if we think the Dom Pravitelstva, of course, the Dvorets Sovietov, but also express itself in the cosmopolitan style of the American corporate architecture, in the case of Narkomtechprom. At the same time, not to mention, for example, the very interesting metro station at in Moscow. The discovery of the archive, of which this splendid exhibition is an outcome, provides a fundamental contribution to the understanding of the artistic architect's artistic and design talent, whose work and writings demonstrate how fully involved he was at the same time in the cultural and ideological debate within the Soviet Union, but also attentive to the developments in international architecture, critically attentive, as shown by his writings in the Soviet journals. Boris Iofan was the true architect of the power, bearer of an unshakable political faith. He was the winner of the most important competition held in Soviet Union. Igor Jesus called it, was the supreme construction project of the land of Soviet. But he was at the same time the organizer of this competition. And it's quite unique, let me know. And it's quite strange that this very first part was for a long time almost ignored: organizer and winner, the architect of the competition and the winner of the competition. A personality with a composite and extremely stratified cultural background, whose fortune unfolds in one of the most complex and tragic period and conjunctures of the history of the 20th century. In conclusion, the figure of Boris Iofan summarizes and brings into play many questions and dilemmas of the history of the 20th century architecture on the controversial and extreme terrain of the totalitarian phenomenon, the complex interaction between assimilation of the rich classical paradigm and the equally complex developments of the avant-garde, the nature of the radical change in creative orientation from the primacy of the modernist visions to the critical assimilation of the heritage in art and architecture in the Soviet Union. The transformation from the culture 1 to culture 2, to use the expression, well-known book expression of Vladimir Paperny. The role of architecture in the international relations between the interwar period and the Cold War, and so on. All these notes investigated in depth and reinterpreted in the recent year are reflected in this splendid new exhibition of your foundation. Thank you so much again.
Thank you very, very much. And I would give the podium to Deyan Sudjic. Please, Deyan, explain about your relationship to the work of Boris Iofan.
Well, Sergei, first of all, congratulations on what looks like a very beautiful exhibition. I look forward to seeing it in person, but there is something so special about seeing the drawings of an architect. Writers can hide behind texts, but architects can't hide behind a sketchbook. To see their images, it really gives an insight into a mind in a way that nothing else can. I first really felt myself fascinated by Iofan back in 2008, when I was fortunate enough to be invited by the great-granddaughter of Iofan's wife, Olga Sasarufo, to see the apartment in the house on the embankment. And his presence was still there. One saw his drawings, one saw the plaster models for the American Expo Pavilion from New York and for the palace. And then one could look from the windows of his apartment and see the reconstruction of the Cathedral of Christ the Savior, which 70 years earlier he would have watched being dynamited from those same windows. And later one could go to see the reconstruction elsewhere in Moscow of the pavilion from the Soviet pavilion for the Paris Expo of 1937. I'm afraid not very beautifully executed, but two extraordinary reconstructions which show just how significant Iofan was as an architect and his power in the Soviet Union. What a life he had, to be born in Odessa, the most cosmopolitan of Russian cities during the imperial times, brought up in a Jewish family, educated first in Odessa, then working with his brother in St. Petersburg, then going to Rome, perhaps because of the quota rules which prevented Jewish students from being educated in St. Petersburg, meeting Olga Sasarufo, an aristocrat, half Russian, half Italian. Those things alone suggest that it must have been a rather extraordinary career to survive in the Soviet Union, to be married to an aristocrat, to be Jewish at a time when to be cosmopolitan was sometimes rather dangerous. And we should think also about the relationship he had with Alexei Rykov, the prime minister who invited him back to the Soviet Union in 1924 to start a new practice. And then to see him survive that relationship, for Iofan to watch his friend Rykov being demoted, first of all, in Stalin's court, and then to see him actually being executed, to watch his friend's wife, Natalia Rykov, also being executed, and then to jump from that to work for Stalin. One wonders exactly what was going on in his mind at that time. One thinks about what one had done in the same circumstances. What does one do to stay alive in difficult circumstances? Some of his clients showed us a different approach. That Institute of Physics, which we were shown the project that he designed for Pyotr Kapitsa, his friend. They were both members of the Jewish Anti-Fascist Committee. They survived. Iofan's other friend, Solomon Mikhails, the chairman, did not survive the purges of the 50s, but Kapitsa had a courage which was to protect his associates from Stalin's threats. He survived, he flourished. One wonders really, was Iofan's career in some ways a tragic one? Did he really want to build the world's tallest building, topped by Lenin, larger than the Statue of Liberty? If one looks at that first round project, one sees something very different. One sees maybe what he wanted to build. Was he pushed into this project? Certainly the records suggest that his relationship with his co-architects was not a constructive one, that they pushed him into making this ever taller building. He described it once as a fully extended telescope, and there are records of Rykov's daughter talking about the only time she actually went to Iofan's apartment in the house on the embankment was just after Iofan learnt that the way to build this building was to obey Stalin, and he called Rykov, who's still not entirely excluded from power, asking for help in what he saw as quite a tragic situation. Then we must look at what actually happened after the war. You know, I simply do not believe that the reason that the university building was given to Rudnev was simply an argument about where to build this tower. He was enough of an architect to realize that you must compromise and bend in some circumstances. And the exact transfer from the design of Iofan and his collaborators to Rudnev was also accompanied by the arrival on the scene of Beria, who was put in charge of finishing this project. Was there a sense, A, that Iofan was too much of a ruthless cosmopolitan? He was denounced in Pravda shortly after he lost the commission. He was also accused of not being capable of finishing on time. I mean, these are difficult and tragic things for any architect to deal with. He survived, and it's interesting to watch the last years of his career, but was he an example of a lost talent? Could he have survived better in different circumstances? I sometimes like to compare him to an architect from America who he did meet, Wallace Harrison, who was involved with the building of the Rockefeller Center, a building which certainly inspired Iofan when he went to New York in 1934. Harrison came to Moscow. He looked at the beginnings of the house on the embankment. They learned from one another. And in some ways, Harrison was fortunate enough that he worked not for Joseph Stalin, but for Nelson Rockefeller. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a great speech, also for you, Dan. And I would give the word to Bernhard Schultz. Bernhard was a lucky man who has seen this exhibition in live. We were yesterday together. Nadia, of course, also, she made it. But Bernhard has seen this exhibition, and I would be very glad if you tell some words about dear Bernhard. Please make a microphone.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, now. Great.
Oh, perfect. Thank you, Sergei, for inviting me to this discussion. Indeed, I was fortunate to see the exhibition yesterday, and I'm overwhelmed by the sheer amount of works that you could put together. It's a complete survey of a life career, of the lifespan of Boris Iofan. I'm not prepared to add anything about the role and the importance of Boris Iofan after having heard all these distinguished scholars who spoke before me. But I want to point out to another aspect. I was brought up in the west of Berlin, so I've always looked from a Western perspective to the architecture and the arts in the Soviet Union. And I remember the time when it was very difficult to have any information about the history of architecture in the Soviet Union. There was a breakthrough at the end of the 70s with the huge exhibition Paris-Moscou, which we were able, or some of us from the West were able to see in Paris, and which later traveled to Moscow. which I think was the first comprehensive exhibition of what had been achieved in the Soviet Union, especially before the Second World War. The interest in the West exploded, so to say, after 1989, when it was possible to mount exhibitions with the material from the Soviet or then Russian museums, such as the one that was staged in Vienna in, I think it was 1990. But what was lacking, and that is the point which I want to make, is the political circumstances under which the arts flourished, or as we have seen in the case of Iofan, did not succeed. But there was always a tendency, and still is, I think, to isolate the arts and the architecture and to see it as a mere aesthetic work, and not in the context of the political and historical situation. And that leads us to the question of the ethic of architecture. Some of you have pointed out to that already. Can we value the work of an architect as gifted as Iofan certainly was, without taking into account his obedience to Stalin and the terrorist regime that Stalin executed, especially in the mid-30s? We have to take into account that the Palace of Soviet, the competitions were underway at the same time when the Great Terror, when the Great Purge happened in the Soviet Union. And this, and seeing the parallel of the artistic and architectural invention on the one hand, and the political situation, the grim situation on the other hand, is something which I cannot can bring together into one picture. And I think that is something we should also keep in mind and should discuss later when we talk about the achievement of Iofan. And the tragedy, so to speak, of Iofan's work is not only that he could not achieve what he always wanted throughout his life. He left a comparatively small body of works, but the tragedy is also that his full capacity was used by a terrorist regime, and that is something which I think we should discuss later. Thank you.
So thank you, dear Bernard, and that was, I think, very important word where I like to continue and ask. I would go from the situation is that you, dear Eva Maria, hello, and Deyan and Alessandra and Bernard would take part in the spontaneous roundtable. We make like 2 questions and discuss these 2 questions, let's say, like through the half an hour, and after that I would give the words to the audience, and it can be discussed some questions from the audience. So my really important question, what I'm interested also is the same as Bernard, how we value, how we estimate as a cultural value what Iofan has brought in his life. So we know very, more or less clear that many very different architects wanted to build on the place of Iofan. So in the archive of Ekaterina Makarova, we have seen together a very interesting letter from Siegfried Gideon, was made in face of all Western European architects from the Union of Architects, International Union of Architects, where it was explained that such a project as the project of Hamilton, another winner of the competition, because they didn't know about Iofan choice, but they did know about choice of Hamilton, of one of 3 winner and winners, and they have spoken about scandal as a result, about cheap department store architecture, and not about worker palace, what they were awaited to get as a winner of the competition. They have sent the letter to Stalin, they have sent the letter to Lyubimov as a minister of light industry and responsible for this competition. So all of them, Iofan was not the only one who took part on this competition and liked to do it. Many of people, and beginning of 30s was already clear enough what happens in Russia. And on the other side, as Deyan told very clear and had right without words, that the idea of this telescope is not burned by Iofan. It was burned by another two partners of him who have brought this idea in the circle, and Iofan had to come first in the relationship with this work. What is the most important in the value of work of Iofan in the center of these circumstances, and as Bernard told, also in the relationship to the policy system we know from the Soviet Union in the 30s. Please, I begin with Eva Maria. What is the value of this work today for the contemporary, let's say, contemporary Western world? What's your opinion? Eva Maria. Microphone.
So I took place in the Soviet architecture in 1994 with the exhibition Berlin, Moscow, Moscow, Berlin. This was my first job to came in contact with the Soviet architecture between 1900 and 1950. And we had several times been in the Joseph Museum and had the possibility to see all this, not all, but a lot of drawings, which I never saw before. I first saw the exhibition in Frankfurt, Soviet architecture on paper. This was my first contact when I was a student, and I was fascinated from the artistic drawings, because in Germany, you know, Pölzig and you know, Mies van der Rohe is not so artistic, I think. But I was fascinated from the drawings of the architects, and I asked why had they been drawn like artists. And it's the same with Iofan. I asked me what kind of person he has been. Is there any person in the audience or who has him met when he was alive? Is there anybody there?
Yeah, I think Ekaterina has seen him in Ekaterina. Yeah. Did you?
Because I would like to know what kind of person he
very
has.
Small child. Yes, as a Ekaterina, as a granddaughter, I think you were like a very small child and have seen him, or just how it was?
Yes, I was 6 years old. Then he died, and I remembered him very well. He taught me to draw. I see how he worked in his apartment. It is here in this room.
So we have directly relationship.
Whoa.
Windows. Then Deyan said that he saw windows. Well, this is windows.
It's winter in Moscow.
Yes.
Yeah, no.
Windows. I said that these are windows about which you said. Okay.
So please, Eva Maria, continue.
Yeah. Yes, I would like to follow Bernard Schultz with the question how he was working in Russia when he came from Italia. So he worked in another way. I had the luck to see all the drawings in the archive in the database with Maxim Schultz sent to me, and I was astonished about changing his styles. I know that he was influenced on neoclassicism and so on, but I think it is interesting to see the changing of his drawing styles. So is there anybody possibly to can say a little bit more to this?
Yes, I would go to Alessandro and would stress also another point in this. Of course, he was coming from Italy, but we know that just in the next year, Mussolini was on power, and all his friends, he was a member of Communist Party, and all his members, Palmiro Togliatti or Luigi Longa, with them he exchanged the letters all his life. They were in prison or in exile, or also it was also some political difficult relationship to what was coming. I don't know how it was related to his going to Russia, but to Soviet Union. But however, his life in Italy wouldn't be also quite easy. What do you think, Alessandro? Microphone, Alessandro.
Okay, thank you so much. There are growing up several very stimulating questions. As concerns the incredible rich profile, creative profile of Iofan, I think that actually we have to analyze the multi-layered influences. It was, first of all, in my opinion, he came from Odessa. And I think that this kind of his personality is very important. And I know that he was in touch also in the 30s with other artists from Odessa living in US and so on. Odessa is a very particular city with a particular culture, eclectic in itself, and I think that it's very important. Thereafter, there was the Odessite period, the period very important in St. Petersburg, at the edge of the century, early age, in which a very special modernism, was flourishing, and neoclassical tendencies were flourishing in St. Petersburg. Kamienostroski Prospekt, the Markov building of Shuko, future, and thereafter he came in Italy. In Italy, he had a contact with the richness of the history, of course, a direct touch with ancient architecture and also Renaissance and Baroque. In general, is mentioned the influence of Brazzini, but Brazzini is far from being the only one. He received very different influence from, in my opinion, also theoretical, from Piacentini at the time. He demonstrated interest from other not so known personalities, but very important, Alessandro Limongelli and so on. At the same time, in the early, he participated to a competition in Milan, mentioned, which you can see in the exhibition in Milan in 1920, after the World War, was growing a very important tendency of neoclassicism, which in my opinion was very close to that of Muzio. Thereafter he moved in Soviet Union. In Soviet Union, in the first period, of course, he was already, we recognize some traces of this Italian and very rich previous education, but at the same time, he was, I have no doubt, very intelligent, very open. He catched all the growing tendencies, the stimulating events which were occurring in the Soviet Union just in the phase of growing of the taking off of the avant-garde. We can speak and speak, but of course he read, in my opinion, he knew what was happening around. He you read Architettura Strawittioswa Moskwy, where, for example, Mendelssohn project and the project of the expressionism was, and so on and so on. He was very intelligent and very open, and was in the position of elaborating a very original vision of architecture in this context already at the end of the 20s, as demonstrated the project for in the second half of the 20s, but in particular the House of Government, the Dom Pravительstva, which is one of the masterpieces of the architectural scene at the time. Thereafter, we have another discourse, in my opinion, very, very interesting. The question suggested by Sergei, how did he manage his position during the competition? And already I have my idea. If you want, it's
yeah, please explain your.
If you, based on researches and archives, at least in part, he was very deeply involved with the Verkushka already in the second half of the 20s. Already when he decided to come back to USSR through maybe the suggestion of Rykov. What he made during these brief years in Moscow, it's already not only it's very clear. You work for the NKVD and so on and so on and so on. Very important work outside of the debates, which was dividing the avant-garde. It was completely outside of the OSED, but he gained the most important works in Moscow. Thereafter, he was, as I mentioned, the organizer, the architect of the organization of the Palace of Soviet, as demonstrated the documents, the archives. It's full of, it's clear. At the beginning with, I'm sorry, the future director of the Accademia Architetturi, forgive, I don't remember right now, but anyway, he was one of the organizers, and I think in a position of being very important. For example, in the documents, it's clearly demonstrate that the different phases of the competition was conceived by this narrow circle, which was deciding the future of the Palace of Soviet in the Dom na Nabierezhnaya, I think in the apartment of, or just in the Stroika. And already in the 30s, they have the idea, among other Iofan, of organizing first a close competition, inviting a selected group of Soviet architects first. The pre-international competition, thereafter an international open competition, and the third competition. Already at the beginning was decided that the international competition didn't had a final issue. Moreover, in the archives, we find documents that, for example, for the invited architects, the German one, was mentioned that they were paid, of course, but they could have ambition for participating to the other. I don't know if it was the case of Le Corbusier, but in my opinion, it's quite it's a great possibility that the final issue was already somehow conceived at the beginning of this, and that is one of the interesting points. I don't know if you but it's my opinion. Of course, thereafter there is the difficult elaboration of the project, which, as mentioned by Sergei, was the first project signed by Iofan was very different from the the final, which was clearly influenced by Schultz and Gelfrey. But at the same time, Iofan was at the core of the organizational machine. Very important, the USDS, Upravление строительства Дворца Советов, which was the machine behind this, the construction of the Palace of Soviet, and thereafter the machine employed during the reconstruction, and thereafter the machine which survived after the war and was at the basis of the Vysotsky.
Well,
So
what I think that we have,
I'm sorry.
we have touched. No, it's great. We have touched. Did I interrupt you, or is it? Was it your speech, Alessandro?
No, please. I'm curious to hear other opinions.
No, it's great. I'm wondering if I interrupted you or I follow you. No, the thing is, I think by Eva Marie was a very important opinion that Iofan is great because he was a great artist. Somehow he was great draftsman of architecture, and any architecture he realized in his drawings is important now as just piece of art, piece of architectural art, because it's a great work of great draftsmen and great thinker of architectural ideas of that time. What you, Alessandro, managed that Iofan was not only very talented architect, but we would say also very talented manager and politician to organize all this and to bring all powers in the direction to be on the head of all this moving. What do you think, Deyan? What is the importance of Iofan? Why his work is so in all circle of architects of that time, Russian architects of that time, we know all their names. Why is the name of Iofan is so significant and so related also with Palace of Soviets? Because he was not an author, the only author of Palace of Soviets. There were three. But somehow we speak about Iofan and we speak about this very significant building like a symbol of time. Why?
Well, we know that architects are very generous about each other. This is sarcasm. And if you look at Gelfrey and Schultz's career, they have form. They managed to win 2 competitions which they had not won previously, the Lenin Library and the theater in Nizhny Novgorod.
In Rostov-on-Don.
Exactly, sorry, yes, quite right. So they actually set up camp in Rostov-on-Don and managed to seize this competition from somebody else. And it seems quite clear they had the same strategy to try and seize something from Iofan. Again, I don't believe this business about they were seen as being much more experienced. They were the same generation at St. Petersburg as Iofan's brother, Dmitry. They were not so much more experienced. They were there because they managed to attract the attention of the real client, who was Stalin. And those images which show their competition entry as the palace of the Doge in Venice, it's interesting to see. I mean, there's been scholars who've looked at the way that drawing found its way into Iofan's presentation. But going back a bit, I think that the relationship between the house on the embankment and the building of the palace is also a very significant one. There was no competition for the house on the embankment. This was basically given to Iofan by Rykov, who was shown the drawings on the floor of his dacha. And Rykov said, yes, let's do that. And this was, of course, criticized at a moment when there was still an open press in the architectural press in Moscow, and Iofan was called to account for how it was that there was no competition. And I think that experience certainly shaped the fact that he could certainly not have that criticism for stage competition. He's insulated himself from criticism, but I think one could say from what we've heard that he was always meant to win, that this was not a competition, it was a kind of show trial. Going back again to that idea about Iofan's exploration of so many different architectural languages when he returned from Italy. And one could say, we haven't talked really about the project in the Donbass, where he basically made Italian vernacular architecture. He tried that, he tried constructivism, he tried modernism, as in Barvika, and classicism. And I think he'd obviously seen the Baron's German embassy in St. Petersburg, executed by Mies van der Rohe, and that was obviously a memory for him. And one could see this experimentation in connection, and this is completely a theory which I'm sure is probably not accurate, but it makes one think about it. The person we haven't talked about is Lazar Kaganovich, who was Stalin's enforcer in Moscow and the man who really shaped the architectural language and discussion. And he was looking for the Soviet imperial style. And as we know, there were very few members of the Communist Party who were also architects. There was no equivalent of Maxim Gorky in architecture. Iofan was the nearest they had, someone who had credibility outside the Soviet Union. And maybe Iofan was exploring these different languages until he finally hit on this classical American influenced project, which was what Kaganovich and Stalin thought would work for their purposes.
Okay, thank you very much. So I would then give the word to Bernard, maybe to close the discussion about the relationship between policy and Iofan. Then I would give the word to Nadia to close all discussion, and then we go to the questions. So please, Bernard.
Sergei, I have to disappoint you because I do not want to close the discussion because I want to add something. It is very interesting.
In this point, of course, but in our circle
I have no knowledge of the archives, and as I unfortunately cannot read Russian, so I'm very interested to hear that obviously the outcome of the competition was decided beforehand. I just want to add or to ask the role of the foreign experts in the early 30s. The Soviet Union under the first 5-year plan had so many invited so many experts also in the field of urban planning, architecture. You know all that much better than I do. And there was a shift away in the 30s, a shift away from experts to domestic knowledge, and all the experts were chased out, more or less, as we know from the case of Mendelssohn, for example, or Ernst May, and so on. And only Hannes Meyer survived in a way because he retreated into theoretical in the premises of theory. Couldn't it have been that the second stage of the competition was open to foreign architects, but in the course of this second stage, the policy changed to leave out all foreign knowledge, and so they were the victims in a way of this change of policy. Could that be possible?
I have my opinion. I have my opinion to what happened. I don't think that Stalin by himself or another members of government were so experienced in the architecture. Even I think Kaganovich was not so experienced. He had a feeling what can happen, but it is much more what Deyan told for the first, that all architects were fighting to each other. And so-called Leningrad School, where, of course, Gelfreich and Choucault and Zholtovsky and Schultz were belonging to, they tried all 20s to fight against this functionalism and constructivism because they didn't like it, they didn't like this trend. And this fight between two trends in the Soviet architecture all along of 20s were ended with this competition, but not were ended by government, from my point of view. Were ended by real different opinions and very many discussions through Gorky, through Kaganovich, through all politicians, but also, of course, through the relationship to American consultants like Albert Kahn, like Hamilton, who was a candidate from Albert Kahn coming for one of three winners. They just told, look, America is the world biggest economy, and they don't build like you, these constructivists, these poor things, they build big skyscrapers, they build very big pyramids. Why you don't build so? And I think this idea to make a biggest pyramid with the Lenin on top, it was an idea of we do bigger as America. To be frankly, Russians like very often to be bigger as America and to make bigger skyscrapers and so on. So far, I don't think I think, Alessandra, that all results were decided already before. Of course, some results were decided before. For example, this letter I explained about from Secret Gideon, they were some words, please given to Iofan. So in that time, Iofan was already involved. He was not only winner of the competition, but he was also an organizer of all process after. But 1 year later, as all competitions were to the end, just in this time was decided that this pyramid will come, because in the letter undersigned by Molotov, it was in May 33, so 1 year later, after the letter of Gideon, and 2 years later after the competition, after the first competition, Molotov undersigned it with the monument with the Lenin on top. It should be Iofan as the main author, but they should take all better things from another projects, and they should involve Gelfreich and Shukor. Shukor was a little bit older, Gelfreich was the same age, more or less. It's true, and they were the same way as other architects to get something without competition. Absolutely true what Deyan says. I would say it was growing. It was growing in the time, and the decision to make pyramid, and the decision to bring Iofan on the top position of it was reaching all the time. So I think that is very important, big importance of this exhibition. Also, not only to show the work of one architect, but to show all this political surrounding, how the architect relates to the time. And maybe I give some words to Nadia, just to stress the importance of this exhibition for our foundation in the line of many. And then I give the word to Dan, because he wanted to say something. Please, Nadia.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sergei, and thank you very much, dear Alessandro and dear Deyan and Eva Maria. I also think it's very important to see Iofan in the global context, in the context of the time, because these developments and, looking to the United States was like a trend of the time, because, well, we think in Germany, I think in Germany it started in the late 20s with Metropolis, etc. And just, the miracle of the USA. And then we came to this relationship between dictatorship and architects. And at the time it was happening in many European countries. And I noticed that, a renowned scholar on this subject in Germany, Harald Bodenschatz, is an audience today, and he wrote some very important books on the urban development in Spain and Portugal, and also in Soviet Union. So it was very much the same. So I just I would like to encourage scholars to see Iofan and in the global context somehow. And it's quite interesting to see that the relationship to the dictator architecture, or we say National Socialistic architecture in Germany, is different from the reception of such architecture in Russia or in the in Spain or in Portugal. It's quite different. So it's an interesting phenomenon. So I think there are still some interesting questions open for scholars to research, and our exhibition is one of the steps on this way to discover Iofan. And once again, I would like to thank all people who work on this important project, and of course my big thanks to Sergei, who made this these drawings accessible to public, because, well, you know, this is something that had to be researched, and now it's probably time to open the discussion. So thank you all.
Yeah, thank you very much, dear Nadia. It's very interesting point, this global, really global context of what we see by Iofan, and also very, I think, very recent. It is never recent to never too late to speak about relationship between policy and architect and the time the architect lives. So please, Dan, tell what you wanted to add.
I think it is so interesting to see some of the crucial moments in 20th century architecture from Iofan's perspective. You know, there was an English playwright, Tom Stoppard, who wrote a play called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, and he looks at Hamlet through the role of two previously minor characters. And I don't think Iofan is a minor character, but he was there in some of the key moments. So conventional history sees the Paris exhibition of 1937 in terms of Picasso and Guernica, but of course the confrontation between Iofan and Speer was an equally powerful, perhaps even more powerful moment. The World's Fair in New York in 1939 is seen in terms of Wallace Harrison and nylons. Actually celebrating Stalin and Lenin in New York was quite an astonishing thing to do as well. And again, we see the Palace of the Soviets competition in terms of Le Corbusier, not in terms of what Iofan did. But I do think it's interesting. I mean, a lot is said about the mysterious sudden arrival of Iofan in the Soviet Union. What was it that connected him? Well, it's quite clear that what connected him to the Soviet Union was that personal friendship with Rykov, the premier, but also with other people who he met in Rome. One of whom was Aaron Wisner, who was actually the leader of Molotov's office for 10 years, very convenient while they're preparing for the Palace competition. And the other one was a Comintern agent, Vladimir Digot, who ended up as the deputy director of the Agricultural Institute, which gave Iofan his second major project in Moscow. So clearly he was an artist, but he also, as all architects who want to succeed, knew how to influence people.
Oh, great. Please, Bernard.
I have one point to add. I'm very grateful, Dejan, that you mentioned Karanovich. We are with this competition, we are in the period of the first and then of the second 5-year plan. And all this planning was about numbers, about figures, about growing. We have not talked about the economy of building. Such a huge project as the Palace of Soviets, wasn't it in a way calculated? It seems odd that a visionary plan was growing by itself without any real calculation how it could be done in the context of a situation where everybody was about numbers. If you look like in a magazine like SSSR Nastroika, it is full of numbers and diagrams and all these the sheer joy of a growing economy. And Kaganovich was the one, you mentioned it, who was pushing the industry, the building industry, even further. He was in charge of the metro project in Moscow, which was one of the biggest endeavors. We shouldn't forget that. It was built in the same time as this Palace of Soviet competition was held. So there was real measurable progress in the building industry to be seen at the same time. It was not something distant in the minds of architects. It was happening right in front of all these people. And that is I have no answer to the question I'm posing myself, but I just wanted to point out, and you might know much better than I do, if there was a relation and how it worked in the course of this project. That I think is interesting, and one should. I'm not able to, but one should read the speeches that Kaganovich held all the time in front of the workers, in front of the Moscow party, and so on. So maybe you can add something to that. Thank you.
Well, the experience that Iofan had of building the house on the embankment should have warned him that you don't build a tall building on the banks of the Moskva River, because they had a terrible time trying to finish it. The house on the embankment went way over budget. It was hugely late. It caught fire. The head of the fire brigade was executed for not putting out quickly enough. Most of the team that were building it got sent off for bad behavior. This numbers-related, idealized world of facts and figures and growth, of course, was a facade on a reality which was very different. And Iofan knew they had no chance of building the palace without American expertise. It's why they went to New York in 1934. They hired advice from New York engineers, who were the ones who actually advised them how to build the foundations for the palace. They advised them on the steel in the same way that Albert Kahn built them car factories. Actually, Kaganovich was also in charge of the car building program. And in the palace, in the Soviet pavilion in the Paris World's Fair, they put a ZIL, a Soviet-built version of an American Ford. But there's correspondence between Kaganovich and Stalin, secret telegrams over the summer, in which Kaganovich had to admit not only were they not building enough Fords, the production line was so badly run and the cars were so badly put together that traffic accidents were being caused by these cars running riot in the streets of Moscow. So I think I'm trying to say that architecture, like so many things in the Soviet Union then, was a very powerful form of propaganda.
Yes, but if I can add, coming from the first question, the relationship with Western country, we have not to forget that the first up to the end of the 30s, the situation was more open, as actually mentioned Dejan, all this, the taking off of the process of construction was based on the relationship first with US, and in the 34, 35, the situation was completely open. We have not to mix what happened in the architectural debate, the position against the modernism, and the other side of the problem, the openness toward the Western expertise and technologies and so on, the Americanism, but not only. The interest, for example, toward the advancement, the development of the Italian architecture in terms of urban planning, Israel was very, very important in the mid of the 30s. So it was actually a process growing in parallel with a dialectic situation with other country and the Western expertise. By the way, I completely agree with Sergei. I exaggerate, I transmit a fake extreme position. Of course, the the final decision was the result, the issue of a process. But what I think is that Iofan already in the early 30s was in a good track, in a very very armored track.
It shows the resolution on the letter
He was
already.
able to manage to address to.
Yeah, he was able to manage.
I completely agree.
Absolutely. Okay, let's maybe get some opinions or questions from the audience. Also, Ekaterina Makarova, granddaughter of Mrs. Rufo and Boris Iofan. She is in the circle, and maybe somebody has questions or some opinions to what we discussed. For me personally, it was an even more interesting discussion as we take it normally by the presence opening. So maybe we do it every time so, because everybody is sitting calm at home or in the office, and it takes more time. Nobody is staying in the very crowded atmosphere of our nice small museum. So please, which questions or maybe opinions do you have? So, also, if maybe Ekaterina, do you like to tell some words about your great
yes,
relative?
Thank you. I'll try. Sorry for my English, because I have any practice after school. So I'm very glad to see everyone. It was very interesting, and it is a great exhibition. It is a super idea to do such a design with red line, which separate one period of work Boris Mikhailovich from another. It is a very interesting idea with red line. I like it. So the discussion is very interesting, and I would like to add about Palace of Soviet. About we speak about its
height.
Its height
of the building.
I think that we must remember that this Palace of Soviet it is planned like an architecture dominant in the center of Moscow, and another seventh
buildings, skyscrapers.
They are connected with this architecture dominant. That's why I think their height is increased. And I think about Boris Mikhailovich, like a person, I would like to add that he was very kind and very generous. And he was devoted to the ideas of communism very much. Many things I know about it, but not now. So I'm very like it is a big honor for us that so much people have like big interest to the Iofan, and I think that it will be connected. It will be продолжится, как сказать.
Yeah, it will continuing in the other exhibitions. That's very important. There will be an exhibition by Sovcom this year, as I have heard. So it is very, very important that also in Russia, many also private collectors and museums are interested for the work of Iofan, what I think is great.
And I would like to say many words of благодарности for you, Sergei, because I saw how with how much love and attention you did this exhibition. because in our in new design they are great. It is a very big work was done. И это очень дорого для нас. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also for me, it is really so. Thank you, Ekaterina. It was a great chance and great pleasure to meet you, to know you as a person, to see your home where Iofan, your family, was lived all time, and it is really a great history of Moscow family. Thank you very, very much. For us, for our foundation, it's greatest honor to exhibit the work of Boris Iofan. I dedicated, as I told, more or less 20 years of my life to collect of them. Your milestone of your part was also very, very important, of course, to make this round work. And what you told, I think, is very important. First of all, that the work of Iofan and Palace of Soviets was very significant central part of Moscow town planning, made this town planning in the next decades, also in many years. All these sisters, seven sisters, and other buildings were coming. They were every time related to the plan. Were more or less unbuilt. Palace of Soviets was like most object. It is unbuilt, but it's dominating for all town planning of Moscow. That's important point we didn't discuss before. And I think it is also another very important idea that the life of Iofan, like life work, all line of his drawings, of his ideas, of his mirroring ideas of society he lived in, this whole history of his life. It is like a big piece of art and piece of history. And that's why this exhibition, for me personally, for our foundation, I think is very outstanding element in our program. So if nobody likes to add anything, I think we are now just good in time. We are 1 hour 40. We are in this stage, and I like to invite you all. You can visit the exhibition. We didn't like to open it personally, but you are invited all time. The exhibition will be open 3 months, and I would be very pleased, together with Nadia, together with all our team, to see you, to meet you, because I think it's very, very rare and outstanding work you can see in this modest small museum. Thank you very, very much for your participation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sergei.
Thank you. Bye.
So goodbye.